Although I didn't really find videos on this topic, so I'm just making one really quick because might as well. But um, like I'm making a project, and this is probably my biggest project, unless besides work. But this project I've coded the entire thing myself. The one at work I didn't code it all myself. I think the things projects within at work were like, I'm guessing they're not even huge probably compared to most like programmers, but I feel like this thing I work with at work is like, I don't know. I don't know how many lines of code, but definitely way under a million and way under 100,000. But like pretty small. But this project I'm working on myself it's gotten to like 4,000 lines of code, and I just dumped in like 1,000 lines in basically a couple days. Like I've really amped up the amount of time I've spent on it, and it's getting overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's all going on anymore. It's like, how do I, how do I not get overwhelmed by this? Because I've had this problem in the past with programming projects. It's like I program, and then things get a little unmanageable, and then I have no idea what I'm doing, and then things start to break, and I have no idea, and it's just horrible. And one thing that I felt like I should do to mitigate that this time around is like if I am getting more line, or like if the software is getting bigger and bigger, is to make sure I do test driven development and I write tests for all my functions. And I was doing that, and I think that really will be helpful, especially moving forward. But I wanted to automate it because I have so many functions, and so was starting. So I had most of my code already, the tests built for it, but I left like maybe a quarter of my code that I need to write tests for, and I'm going to automate it. So I'm going to test it and make sure that it works for the quarter of my code base. And so I've been working on this automated testing software for my project, and yeah, I dumped in like 1,000 lines of code for it just now, like today and yesterday, I'd say. And yeah, and I've written so much code, and now I don't really. I just have been writing and writing and writing just to solve a problem, because every time I solve a problem, I basically release a version to my version control. Like I keep a version out there. Like what do I have right now? I don't have the screen up, so I can't show you, but I have four okay, I have four major versions. The fourth version is by far the biggest. The other, well, actually, I guess I have five major versions starting with zero. But my V4, my fifth version release, by far has the most code, I'm sure. It has 4.9, so up to 9 iterations. And then in the ninth one, it goes 4.9.13. So that's how many versions I guess I have in total. That's not really an accurate count, but definitely five major releases, and a lot of smaller ones inside of it. So I I just yeah, I could do this. I don't know. It won't work. I would just show you my screen with the camera, but basically I'm still not even done writing this automated testing, and I think my project is just a chatbot that isn't scripted. Like it doesn't just read a response, compares it. Oh, this is what you need to respond. Like it, I want this chatbot to be able to interpret lines of code, and like given a sentence, like finding the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, etc., which it already actually does stuff like that. But what it doesn't do yet, I haven't written all the interpretation logic. My next big step for the project actually is to find the subject of a sentence. And I read on, it's pretty easy in English, like how people learn English. But basically, you find the noun verb pair. I like that makes the most sense. Or basically, like the noun that verbs, or what verbs work with the main noun, or whatever, something like that. So, and I actually have an idea of how I want to implement that. But before I do that, I was writing all these tests, and um, and then I was like, you know what? I want testing to be automated. And I know there's features like libraries or whatever. And I'm working in Python, so and using PyCharm. PyCharm has some like it'll like let you build a test, and you can kind of modify it yourself. And then there's also like a library. I forget what it's called, but it'll do testing for you. It'll test your entire code base. You don't have to do anything. But I just really want a lot of the control, so I was just like, you know what? I want to write it myself. I don't know why I'm so much like that, because I feel like most programmers, they're willing just to use other people's libraries. But I kind of want to, I sort of want to make money off of this. Like, I want to make a software that I have most of the control over, or so I don't know. That's like a kind of where I'm coming from, but that might be totally dumb. I really am just a very self-driven programmer. Like, I haven't had a lot of. I got taught programming in college, and I thought I really enjoyed it and thought it was pretty easy. And then I've really just done it a lot now, and my job is really just programming and documentation. But so yeah, so I guess the thing that I just read that really helped me out that I want to share is something I found on Quora, just how to not feel overwhelmed in programming large projects. And this guy named Basim Degadi, this is on Quora. I feel like I already said that, but he said this is very normal for both a small and a large code base. Even the most experienced developers go through a brief phase of confusion whenever they're dealing with a new code base. The more experienced you are, the shorter this period will be. The best thing you can do is to go through the project in its entirety and not only read it, but try to understand what each part does. If the project is documented, read the documentation as you go. Understand that what the application does first, then try to simulate scenarios from A to Z on the code level. Yeah, and then if you're working with people, just ask questions. And then, yeah, don't go down in the nitty gritty of the little details. Like, kind of get an overall idea of how everything works. Just think of it as an interesting puzzle. What do you do when you try to solve a Rubik's Cube for the first time? I think I have done that, and I just Googled how to do it, and then I just followed the steps. But anyways, yeah, really just take your time, break things down. And I think if you're getting confused about your project that you're working on, it's getting too big, too overwhelming, take breaks, of course, but you're gonna not want to go work on your programming project because it's so confusing and so big to you. But you need to just take a deep breath, look through your files, look at the clutter. And here's also some steps that I have for helping to reduce clutter and confusion and all whatnot. I don't know where I'd read this. I haven't read programming books per se, but I've heard stuff from the internet or about people who talk about programming, or just from other programmers myself. And one of the things I've heard, which may or may not be a good idea, is to keep all functions or methods like 30 lines of code or under. Another one I saw the other day, which I kind of do like, is not to have nested blocks of code greater than like 3 or 4. Like, if you're nesting code in a function more than 3 or 4 times, then that's too much. It's too cluttery. It's too confusing. What other things to declutter code? One thing I've also seen is, instead of naming your functions like and variables names that are arbitrary or not English, basically don't make sense, name them things that make sense, and that is like you can understand in English. The idea was like, okay, back in the day, maybe you'd like to write a lot of variables like in math, like y equals mx plus b, like that type of stuff. But nowadays, like for one, our monitors are huge. We don't program just for math anymore. Not that we don't, but and not that underneath the hood all of it is math. It's all just bytes and adders, subtract, or I don't know. I think everything is an adder technically, but add, subtract, multiply, divide, XORs. But anyways, that's under the hood. But when you program, you think in logical terms, and then you write it down. And it's, programming is, you're an English speaker probably, or whatever language you speak, and you're programming in it, and the compiler converts your words, your ideas of what you know into machine stuff, so you don't have to type all that out because it'd be just way too crazy. It's just all automating. So kind of what I want to do even past my chatbot is I want to be able to have it write its own code, you know, and learn of things itself, you know, just basically make an AI. And yeah, so anyways, that's my general thoughts in